Well, I don't use a. I use a headset, so it shouldn't be my own microphone that is interfering, but it could be the one of you guys have your microphone close to the keyboard. That's why I'm trying to find the setting for muting everyone but myself. And I know it's here somewhere. I've used it before. Okay, so now it's in presentation mode. I'm the only one who can talk. So if you want to get my attention, try to do it by chat. And if I don't spot it, it's probably because I'm busy. Just save your question for the end. So today's presentation, I'm going to do a very short introduction of myself and a very short introduction about Access Europe. And then I'll jump into Access charting. When we create a chart directly in Access, I'm going to show a chart in Excel. I am going to show different ways of getting your data into Excel. I'm going to show a few ways of automating Excel and how we can format Excel from Access. I'm going to show some tips, helper functions, and if we have time at the end, I'm going to show off a bit with some of the stuff I've made just to show what's possible. About myself, my name is Anders. I'm from Denmark. Okay. So so I'm back to conversation mode. I hope the audio is better now. Was it so bad that you'd like me to repeat the first bits I said? Okay.
Yes, please.
So,
Wasn't able to understand you.
yeah, be a real dreamy presentation if we can have audio issues. Uh, I'll try again. Today's presentation will be start with a short presentation of myself, and then I'll talk a bit about Access Europe, and I'll talk about Access charting. And just 1 second, just going to answer this chat. Okay. Then I'm going to show how we can chart both in Access and in Excel, how we can get our data into Excel, how we can automate Excel, how we can do some formatting in Excel directly from Access. I'll show some tips and tricks, helper functions I like to use. And if we have time at the end, I will show some of the stuff I've done, the more advanced stuff. So, quick about me. My name is Anders Christensen. I'm from Denmark. I graduated from the university in 2006. I'm a civil engineer. I actually specialize in microphysics. In 2007, got hired into a company called Atkins, and I have worked for a year with railway safety and hazard management. And by accident, or by coincidence, I started making a database in 2008, and pretty much have been working full-time with Access since then. I never used it before, so I think that says something about how easy it is to learn Access. In January of 2014, I was nominated and became an Access MVP. I'm hoping to be renewed this January. Let's see what happens. So I hope the audio is a bit better now. So my specialty, I work on, when it comes to my Access work, I've mainly worked on information-based applications. I don't know if that's the best word for it, but by information-based, I mean applications where the text content that the user writes is the main focus of the application. It's not about sales or inventory, but it's about the content that the user writes. So examples of my work includes a requirement management application that I made for the building of the new metro system in Copenhagen. It's a underground railway with 16 stations. Um, Now, the requirement management application I wrote ended up containing just about 9,000 requirements, 16,000 review comments. I was used by more than 50 engineers in writing their technical specifications. I also wrote an application that was used to evaluate the tender bids we received, or the company for which I consult received. Um, it's a bit stressful when you're writing an application and you're the sole programmer, developer, and that tool is part of the process of determining who gets awarded with a 1 billion euro contract. One of the latest things I've made is a document review tool, which is tracking all of the documents we receive. Received more than 5,000 documents at this point, reviewed them, commented on them. So that was a short about me. And I was going to do something about Access Europe, but I think I'll save that to the end because I ended up spending so much time getting the audio to work. I'll skip directly into showing a quick charting in Access. So if we have a standard form and I want to do a chart, we have a chart here. I click it and select my table. Just say I want, just put it all in there now. Say I want a simple bar chart. First off, when we look at it here, you can already see that it looks quite ugly. That the sample is not updated. It's hard to see when you're designing what it's supposed to look like. If we do switch to form view, it gets a bit more clear what we're looking at. But in my opinion, the Access charting default settings are quite ugly and a bit simplistic. Hasn't really followed with the time. Take an example of taking the same data I just had, putting it into Excel, and just using the chart with Excel to create a bar chart. Already here, I think what we're looking at is much more fancy. If you do want to make charts in Access, I know that Crystal Long, another Access MVP, on her YouTube channel recently posted a video on how to make and use charts directly in Access. I can recommend going to see that. So before we can do any charting with Excel, we need to get our data into Excel. Now we have a few ways of doing this. The simplest option is the do command transfer spreadsheet. So the syntax is do command transfer spreadsheet, export, what type of spreadsheet do we want to create, and we can specify either a table or a query. And I don't recall if we can directly specify SQL syntax, but that might also be an option. We specify where we want to place the folder and what it should be called. And the last bit I use here is just to open the file just created. So let me try and execute this. And we get our information into Excel, and it gets opened. So if you just want a quick way of getting your data into Excel, this is handy, but it doesn't give much options for further working with the data. It doesn't give much options in terms of placing it. It is quite easy to use, but I find it a bit limited. And if we want to use automation anyway, which I want, then I find that the copy from record set function is superior. Let's take a look at that. So this is the part where I want to start automating Excel. The copy from record set is, as far as I recall, it's actually an Excel method. So before we can even start using it like this, we'll have to go into Tools, Preferences, and set a reference to Excel. You can do late binding with this also, but I've always worked in an environment where we have Excel available, so I've skipped the hoops of using late binding. So what we start by doing is creating an Excel application, and then we set our application to a new Excel application. We dimension a workbook, and we add a workbook to our Excel application. If you want, you can specify or use a template here. The copying is quite simple. I use my workbook, worksheets, and specify a range, and I do a copy from record set. I could create a record set first and open it, but I could also just do it like this. Current DB, open record set, my table. I want to open it as a dyna set, and that gets copied directly into Excel. One of the things to be concerned about is that whenever you're automating Excel, you should have error handling so that if some error occurs, you don't leave an Excel application running in the background. Or at the very least, you should ensure that you turn it over to user control. That's these two lines here. I set the application to be visible, and I set it to be controlled by the user. I'll try and run this for you. And you can see we got our data into Excel, and it's actually also quite fast. See, when I click run, it almost opens instantaneously. So the copy from record set, I find it to be both fast, flexible, because we can specify the range where we want to put the data in. And we already have our application dimensioned and open, so we can use further automation on it. One thing I've been missing from the copy from record set function is the ability to include headers in our code. But if we're any developers worth our salt, we'll be able to just write a function for that ourselves. You see an example of this here, record set to Excel. I specify the range, and it takes an Excel range as a parameter. It takes a record set as a parameter. And then I loop through the record set and simply copying the name of the field into the Excel range. I have a small helper function called column letter, which will basically convert any number into a Excel column name. So 1 becomes A, 2 becomes B, and so on and so forth. And finally, I copy the record set. The good thing about working with a range in Excel is that you can when you use the term or reference A2, when you're using that on an object that's already a range, the A2 will be relative to that range that you're using. So if you pass a range saying I want this table I'm copying to start in B1, then from the worksheet point of view, this range would actually become C2 because it's relative to the range, and that range started in B instead of starting in A. I hope that makes sense. It's a bit hard to explain.
Can we see the code for your column letter tool?
Right here. This bit here.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next bit, this will actually show how we're using the function I just wrote, the helper functions, record set to Excel. I note how I'm passing the range C3, so I want my table to start in C3. So you can see here, it starts in C3 now. Again, here I start by, all of this is just opening Excel, starting a workbook. In this case, I also set a reference to an Excel sheet, and I name my Excel sheet in my record set, and I copy it with my names, and this is the part where I start to generate a chart. Just going to execute it. Now we can see we have our chart created. One of the things I did not like about this is that I want the order to be reversed. If you're working with Excel in this way, one of the easiest part about Excel is using the macro recorder. And in 2010, you can just go click this small icon down here. If you have the developer in your ribbon, if you don't have it, you can go to customize the ribbon. And somewhere over here, you just click this on and off. Anyways, start my macro recorder. Click the axis that I want to change. And specify here categories in reverse order. I stop my macro recorder, switch to the Visual Basic environment, and go look at the code it created for me. And now there's a lot of stuff going on that I don't really need when it records a macro, related to how the axis was selected and whatever else I clicked by accident before I got to selecting the axis. But this part down here, active chart axis Excel category dot reverse plot order equal true. So basically, if there's anything you want to do in a chart and you know how to do it manually in Excel, just do it while you're recording it, and you can look at the code. That's by far the easiest way to get to what you want to do. So we go look at the next demo I have prepared. I do a couple of things. I change the tick label spacing. I change where I want the tick labels to appear, and I set the reverse plot order. You can see it's been turned around now. I think it's important to set the tick label spacing, especially when you're creating charts through the use of code, because in this case, my ticks on the left-hand side are persons, and it wouldn't make sense if when I'm doing testing, I might only have a couple of persons in my test. But if we start to have many people, we might reach a point where Access thinks, hey, I'll just use 2 ticks between people. That means half our people are disappearing from the chart. And that's not desirable. The one thing is you have to think a bit ahead on your data, and if you have situations where you don't want the tick labels to disappear, you should take that into account by not defaulting to the automatic settings. one thing I do here, when I copy my data, I set my range. You might recall I showed you my first record set to Excel function. I made a modification down here, record set to Excel2, and the difference is I use it to return the range. And this is easy because it allows me to have the range specified for generating the chart. So this bit is the same as the first record set to Excel. I follow it by a record set move last, and this is to make sure that my record set has an accurate record count. And then I want to return the range I've used for the table. So I take the current range I have, and obviously, since it's a relative reference, it'll start in A1. And to get the amount of columns, I just count the amount of fields in my record set. And to get the amount of rows, I just count the amount of records in my record set. Finally, I add +1 because I added a header, so I want that to be part of the range as well. The beauty of returning the record set directly is that the chart I generate has a method called setSourceData. I just set it directly to my data range. This means that this is the data range, and I just pass that to the chart. I don't have to do anything fancy with adding each series by itself. Just pass this, and I already have a chart. There might be cases where you want to do it differently, or you want to set the series in a specific order, and of course you can do that, but it's a bit more troublesome, and just passing the entire range directly to the chart is usually the easiest way to get it done. Okay, just gonna switch back here. And you recall I talked about setting the tick marks. Another thing you might want to set is the maximum on your axis. So this is a chart that's used in a weekly status report, and it shows how many comments were closed and how many comments were created during the last week. Now, two things. I want it to be comparable between weeks, so that if you're having two weekly reports next to each other, I want them to have the same range. I want them to go from 0 to some specific value, which shouldn't change because I want them to be comparable. I don't want one week to go from 0 to 10 and the next week to go from 0 to 100. That will make them hard to look at. So if you take a look here, you can see that a single person created over 120 comments that week, which basically means it gets quite hard to view accurately how many comments the rest of these people created, because this one gets so large. So what I want to do is I want to cut off at a specific value. In this case, I want to cut off at 50. Of course, that means that if I just did a cutoff at 50 and set the maximum axis to 50, that there's actually some of the information gets lost because you can't accurately see how many comments did that person create. So what I did was come up with a way that made the chart look like this towards the end, so it becomes clear that there is more information here. This person created more than 50. And how did I do that? I do it by using automation again. There's no built-in function, at least not as far as I know. If there is, I wasted a lot of time generating this. So basically all of this you've already seen before. Open the application, open a workbook, open a worksheet. In this case, I set the range. I set the header header row manually. I open my record set. I move through it to get my accurate. Just copy the entire record set now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to step through some of this. And close some of these Excel I'm not using. Again, when Excel opens through automation, it will default not be visible. But if I'm working on it, I'm trying to debug some problem. Great part about the immediate pane is I can just go down here and specify my application Excel. Just do like this: app Excel dot visible equal true, and my Excel application now became visible, and it gets much easier to debug. I can step through it, and if you're doing this, you might sometimes notice that when you're stepping through Excel, Access sometimes loses the stepping through. It will just execute the rest of the code, and that happens sometimes. It's some kind of bug between Excel and maybe it's not a bug, maybe it's a problem in the way Excel works. Anyways, I will proceed. I've exported my data just now, and I'll use a list object. I'll add my range, and I'll specify that I want it to be table style medium. Again, this is an easy way to use the built-in functions. So basically, this is the same as if I'd gone up and selected formatting as a table, one of these styles. But I can do the same through my code, and I probably recorded this from a macro and just copy-pasted it in. I also wanted to show my totals. It added a total row down here. I'll add a formula to a range. So I'll take the range, D plus my record count, and add a formula. Basically, I'm just added this formula down here. You can add formula through Excel as well. You just have to prefix the formula with a citation or quotation mark, and then it's quite easy actually. Add another formula. I'll move on, and I'll start adding some extra columns. And these are the columns I need for my chart calculations. So I've added these 4 columns. Basically what they're doing is saying, if this value is more than 50, I want it to only display as 45, otherwise display the value. If the value of my comments closed is more than 50, display it as 5. If we go look at the single place where the person created more than 50 comments, you see those 125 comments he created gets cut down, divided into 2 columns, one saying 45 and one saying 5. That's actually what I'm using directly in my chart. But these columns, they're quite ugly and they won't make any sense to the user. So I'll proceed and tell Excel to hide those columns. Go ahead and add my chart. I'll specify the type. I'll give it a name. Now this is important. If you're hiding columns, you have to set the plot visible only to false. Otherwise, Excel will automatically hide plotting data from non-visible columns. This one actually threw me for a loop for a while. I was like, where's my data going? And I found out there was a setting that would hide this. This is about manually adding series. I can't just specify the range because it's a bit more tricky in this case. So I'll go ahead and add my first series, and that'll be the closed comments. I give it the name, and I start adding values and x values. Add a new series for the created comments. So you can see now it doesn't look too pretty because I have all my extra series down here. I'll go and format the series. These are the overrun series. That's basically by overrun, that's the bit out here, specifying that there are more information. The data has overrun its maximum value. I'll give it a special format. I'll do the same with the closed series. And now you can see it's starting to look a bit more like the chart I have in my display. But I also want to remove my legends that I'm not going to use. So I'll just delete those legend series. Now I have my closed, I have my created. I'll set the axis to go from -50 to +50 and have major unit of 10. Set the tick label spacing, the reverse plot order, and I want my tick labels to be placed low. Let's go see it again. I have a function called format legend because I do a lot of formatting on legends and I want them all to look the same. So it's much easier to just, this is the way I want my legends to look. I'll write a function so that all my legends end up looking the same. I want to set an element. I want the element chart title to appear above chat. And I want the caption to be recent comments. We see we got a caption here. And I move the chart around a bit. I specify that I want it to be just after the 5th column, and I want it to be exactly one row down. I want it to have a specific width and height. And I'll go ahead and do some page setup as well. This is also quite useful. I set the print area equal to the address of the used range. So if the user wants to print this, it'll be directly printable with the information to be shown. I go ahead. Another custom function is to always add a header and a footer. Follows a specific pattern. I want my right footer to be and page number of this and n. That is the total number of pages, basically page x, y. I can go ahead and write another header that I have a document ID. A few other things, and the header and footer are now done. I think maybe because I closed the Excel sheets in the middle of all of this, something went wrong, and the series 5, 6, 7, and 8 got added by accident. I don't really know where that came from. Could also be a side effect of having Excel open, doing selections, having something selected when I added the chart. Sometimes when you're debugging and it looks weird, it could be because you're doing unexpected stuff in the middle of it. Finally, I want to add a front sheet to my Excel workbook. I do this because sometimes I'll have 8 charts that I'm copying into Excel, and what I usually do is I place each of them in their own sheet, and then I generate a front page containing like a summary showing just the charts. And if you want the detailed information, you can flip through to the other worksheets where you can see all the data behind it, but on the front page you'll only get the charts. Call it like my management overview, because management, they just want to see the charts. So I add an extra worksheet, and I put it before the first worksheet. I give it a name, and I have this place chart function. Basically, what it does is it takes a chart as input, takes a range, title. You can optionally set some other parameters. I set a new chart. I set its title. I do some things to the page, and then I take the chart I passed in, and I use its parent, because its parent is a shape object, and apparently you have to work with shape objects in Excel, not directly with the chart. And I don't have any good explanation for that. Never researched it much. So I copy the sheet, or I copy the shape containing my chart, and just paste it into the range on the worksheet where I want it to be. I do some formatting to the chart, or change the width, and I say this shouldn't have a chart title. So this is part of the front page. You can just see the single chart being placed, and if you imagine all the other charts being lined up next to it. I'll try to show you how this works when I'm doing it from my main application. So here you can see how each chart is being generated in its own worksheet. It's also being copied to the front page, which is being just called summary. So if we go look at the chart now, you can see I'm actually putting in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 charts. You can see the recent comments charts down here. That was basically the chart I demonstrated to you a while ago. The lead reviewer, that was one of the first charts I created. And so I hope you can see that this front page or cover sheet, if you want, is the kind of things that most management wants to see. They want a summary view. They just want to see the chart, see how it's how the project is progressing, if there are any issues. You can see this lead reviewer worksheet I have. Quite simple coloring. It shows how many reviews or document reviews are assigned per person, and if any of those are late. So if you're a manager, you can easily see the workload of individual people, and you can see if any of them are behind on their workload. If we take a look at the chart up here, this is a chart that shows on the left hand of the black line, it's showing the last 28 days. On the right hand, it's showing the next 28 days. We have 28 days from when we receive a document until we have to officially issue a reply. And if it's green, it means that we received the document and we issued a reply in due time. If it's red, it means we've submitted it, but it was late. We can't actually see from this chart if it is late by an hour or late by 7 days. You can just see that we submitted something and it was a bit too late. The red and crossed out, that is documents that are late and are still late. We haven't submitted them yet. So if we take a look at the small one over here, we can see there's a document which is 28 days overdue now. So again, from a management point of view, this chart helps tell people, management, what focus areas do we need. On the right-hand side, we can see documents. We can see we received a lot of documents right here, and we've only actually reviewed one of them. So a week from now, we're going to have a huge hurdle of documents that we should submit, we should finish our review of. Again, if you're management, you can look at this and say, hey, we might want to get a focus on getting these documents submitted, otherwise we'll end up with 30 late documents. Just give me a second to check my notes. Yeah, one other thing to show is another chart. Should just take a few seconds to generate. As I said, the project I'm working on contains the railway line, underground railway line, metro. Contains 16 stations, currently building it. And this is an overview. In the middle, I inserted a picture. The railway is being built in 3 phases. The green is the first phase, the purple is phase 2, and the blue is phase 3. Do that because we want phase 1 to be complete as soon as possible, because then we can start doing test runs. And I've inserted 16 charts around my image, my picture. I've color coded them. We can see on each chart has its own data. Each chart also has its own sheet down here. So we can see on this station we have received so many documents. If they're green, it means we've reviewed them without comments. If they're red, we reviewed them with comments. If they're blue, it means if there's an active review going on. I'll see if I can show some of the code for that. So this here is the part where I actually insert the pictures. This is one picture. And in order to not have a legend on each of these charts, what I did was I created this in Paint, this small image here, so that I could just place that in as a single combined legend. And I inserted this in the same way. Take my worksheet and I insert the picture, and then I move it around. I won't go into the details of all this code because it's getting late. So I'll wrap up my Excel automation for now. One of the important things is always close Excel or turn over control to users. Never leave Excel hanging. You should have error handling that either closes your Excel application or at the very least makes it visible so that the user knows what's going on. If you're working with Excel and something is behaving odd or behaving differently than it did half an hour ago, just go into your task pane, task manager, try to see if you've left some sort of Excel open, and go ahead and end it, especially if it's not visible down here, it's because something went wrong in your code and you didn't remember to clean up after yourself. Helper functions. I use something called safe Excel sheet name. I can show you that. So it seems my connection just went for a second. I hope it's back up again.
Yes.
Thank you for the confirmation. Yeah, safe Excel sheet name. This is useful if you're passing something to your. Let's say I'm passing the name of the station, and I want to use that as my Excel sheet name. Then, in case the station name contains characters that are not appropriate for a sheet name, I use this function to make sure that my sheets have a name that is acceptable. I showed you some of the functions to set header and footer. I strongly recommend, if you're doing a lot of charts, try a function for setting the header and footer. It makes it easier to reuse it. If you're formatting Excel's charts, write a function like I did with the legend. This will help to ensure that your charts look consistent. So I'm going to talk about Access Europe for a moment. Access Europe is a newly formed group. It's an online virtual group, and it's not, in my opinion at least, exclusively open to Europeans, but the idea is to have people in Europe who are interested in Access who can meet once a month, talk about topics, get to know each other, expand our network. So what topics might interest any of you, or would any of you be interested in doing a presentation? This is where you speak up.
I'd be interested in seeing the data, having it automated where the data pulls from an Excel sheet into Access and then functions happen from there, because that's most of what my information is fed to me on is either an Excel sheet or a CSV file, and I need to be able to get it to feed in a lot easier than what I've got, like specific ranges out of an Excel file and have it feed into Access instead of the other way around.
So, an import of an Excel sheet.
Yes, but I would want to be able to control
the range.
Yeah, the range.
Okay. I have some stuff about that. I could maybe do that, or I don't know if it'll be the next meeting. But we could. That would be a possibility for a topic. Anyone else?
Could I hear that last request again? I didn't quite catch it, I'm afraid.
Basically, it would be instead of Excel data coming from Excel going to from Access going to an Excel sheet, from an Excel sheet going to Access. So my data comes to me in an Excel sheet, and I need to feed it into Access, but I have to pick and choose the ranges I want the data to come from. You
do appreciate that there is a way, well, that might not work in your case, might it? Okay, yeah, I understand. Thank you.
a topic that I've started to investigate recently is the access ribbon. I've tended to avoid playing around with it up until now, but if you've got any kind of useful tips and tricks with the access ribbon, I'm sure I'd find that very handy.
I'll write that down as well. Access ribbon.
Yeah, but the things I'm thinking of are writing custom ribbons that are activated or deactivated, you know, if a particular user comes on or if a certain form is opened, and just other possibilities around that.
Yep.
Did you, Smiley? Did you, Adrian here, by the way? Did you spot that Crystal offered to present?
Nope. I'll look through the comments before I sign off. I don't think. I didn't. I stopped reading the comments because I found it too distracting to try to read comments and talk at the same time.
Absolutely. No, I think it was very wise, but she did nevertheless.
Thank you, Crystal. These are other topics that come off of my mind. The first presentation I did in this group was about how to use a very short introduction to what you can do with an access tree view. And I could talk some more about that. If you want to see the first video, it's available from accessusergroups.org. I could show information about how to use a list view. It's another ActiveX control. I can talk a lot about code. I love to code. I have a bit of code that's also available from my webpage that shows how you can track changes to a memo field within Access. I could talk a bit about writing your own add-ins for personal use, developer add-ins. Talk about report view, something that's not used a lot, but can be useful, or something else. If you have anything you would like to hear about, please send me a mail on TheSmileyCoder@gmail.com. If you have any feedback, whether it's on quality of audio, quality of presentation, things that is good, things that is bad, please don't hesitate to send it to me. It will make it easier for me to improve for the next meeting.
The volume's gone right down, inaudible pretty well.
So basically, audio is an issue.
It just in the last half a minute, it went down to.
I think what happened is someone was having a TV on in the background, and I think it's basically two people were kind of competing for the audio. I think that's how Join Me manages when two people are talking at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So does anyone have anything else to add? Otherwise, I will sign off and say thank you to everyone who showed up.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all for showing.
Yeah.
Thank you
for doing this.
Thank you.